she gave me some really direct feedback as well, because there were a lot of things that I just kept hiding in the depths of my core. It's like, okay, it's fine. We just keep stuffing it down. Eventually it'll go away, and it never went away.
Welcome back to the You Need a Counselor podcast. This is a show presented by Heart and Solutions Counseling Agency. We release new episodes every Sunday at 5 p.m. Central and encourage you to batch up that laundry, put away the dishes, plan for the week ahead, or do any other task that might seem daunting while you give our show a listen. You might just be encouraged to call your therapist, connect with this week's guest, or seek out those services you've been considering for a while but haven't made the commitment to yet. If you are in the state of Iowa and are in need of mental or behavioral health counseling, give us a call at 1-800-531-4236. Enjoy the show.
Hello, and welcome back to the You Need a Counselor podcast. My name is Dr. Julie Johnson. I'm the president and founder here at Heart and Solutions Mental Health and Behavioral Health Counseling here in Iowa in the United States of America.
And I'm Chrissa Hunt. I am our vice president in charge of the behavioral health department. And this is our podcast, You Need a Counselor. So we are designed for people curious about counseling but have barriers keeping them from experiencing the benefits of counseling. Our mission is to share stories about counseling, good, bad, and indifferent, and spread the message that everyone can benefit from mental health and behavioral health counseling services.
So our guest today is joining us from Vietnam currently. We've got Geleen Antonio with us today. Geleen is the founder over at Geleen on the Go, and she is the host of the Travel Not to Escape website, the Travel Not to Escape connection groups, podcast, just all kinds of different events, classes through Travel Not to Escape. So welcome, Geleen. Thank you so much for being here. And tell us, what is Travel Not to Escape?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I'm so excited. I love talking about counseling. It's helped me so much. So it's one of my passions is sharing that with others. And so Travel Not to Escape is focused on empowering women to change their lives through the use of solo travel as a catalyst for that transformation. A lot of people tend to use travel as yet another way to escape themselves. And I really empower women to use it as a way to, instead of living the two different versions of themselves, like do the work, be that one authentically you version that you love and you're excited to live that life. So a lot of classes, events, all focused on connection with yourself, with others, reintroducing play back into your adult life as well. So that's just a taste of what I do under this umbrella.
So we can see from your bio, you have a background in neuroscience and corporate healthcare. How did you go from that field to now traveling the world and starting this new platform?
Honestly, a counselor. So I've worked through so many things. I think initially I went down the neuroscience route. I went down that corporate ladder route because it was what was expected of me coming from an immigrant family and just having that wish for the someone in the family to become a doctor. So my initial track was to do neurosurgery and pivoted in different ways into healthcare consulting. And I realized at a certain point that I wasn't happy. I was really stressed. I was going into the hospital for different stress-related symptoms that were unexplainable. And I really hit a rock bottom at that point. This was around 10 years ago. That pushed me to really assess what I was doing in my life and what I needed to change because I could not continue at the pace that I was going at the life that I was living. And so I had come to some realizations and ended up finding my first therapist back in 2015. And through a series of different therapists, coaches, different spiritual modalities, just really trying to discover what actually fulfills me. Uh, I've been able to take the risks that I needed to pivot my career into something that I'm really excited about and something that's just so authentically me now.
So for the people that you work with, the women that you work with, are you seeing or were you seeing that people were traveling in order to escape versus in order to heal and to be that best version of themselves. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, yeah. I feel like that's yeah, very typical, especially in US culture, right? Is to you only have 2 weeks off throughout the year, potentially if you have vacation. And during that time, you just want to get away. You want to go on vacation, you drink to excess perhaps, or you just pack your itineraries filled with back-to-back things so that you probably heard that phrase, you need a vacation from your vacation. And then you start all over again, waiting until those 2 weeks are back on the schedule and you can go and do it again. And you do this over and over again until you retire potentially. And so I speak with a lot of people from US corporate who are on this cycle and realizing, okay, well, that was a fun vacation, but like I'm still miserable whenever I get back. So how do I change that? And so I've done some confidence coaching, solo travel confidence coaching, because on top of not realizing that they're on this pattern, they also have this fear of taking that risk to go off on their own because they are a woman, because there are risks. And maybe if you don't speak the language, or maybe if you just are really bad at navigation, like how are you going to do this by yourself? So I walk through with women and kind of a coaching capacity to help prepare them for their first solo travel trip, and not just design a trip that's here's, all the activities that you can do in the city. It's where are you at right now? Where do you want to be when you come back from this trip? So let's use these 2 weeks to actually be intentional about how you can set it up to nourish you, to inspire you, whatever it is that you're needing. Let's go through the process of asking those questions to design a trip that's going to be transformational for where you're at right now.
I love that because I think you're right. A lot of people wait all year for a vacation and then when they go on it,
Mhm.
way too much and come back and are even more exhausted. So what are some
Mhm.
tips that you might give during your coaching to help relax on vacation and actually get the most out of that time off?
Yeah, so I start off with asking where they are, because each vacation or each trip is going to be different based off of what they're needing at that moment. So perhaps maybe they do need just something completely relaxing, and they don't need to be going place to place, place to place. And if that particular person who's wanting to be fully relaxed and maybe get some clarity over a decision that they have to make by the time they get back, maybe you don't bombard them with an itinerary that's, 10 different activities in Europe that they do, and then they're going to 10 different cities in 2 weeks, right? So you really want to design a trip that's going to be supportive. And I think not a lot of people realize that because they get an idea maybe from social media of, oh, I should go to this like hot spot this year because everyone's going there, without actually asking themselves the question of if that particular trip is actually going to help them in wherever they're at. So that's the first thing, is really be intentional. I think that's my major tip. And there's a lot of different ways that you can be intentional. But first is asking that question of where are you at? Where do you want to be? And let's choose a destination that is going to support that.
So I love this idea of the intentionality with travel because it sometimes there is that intention of like, well, I just don't want to be here in my daily life,
Mhm.
right? Like, and so, like, yeah, that is one potential purpose, and that is one potential intention for the trip. But at the same time, we still have to come back to this. And then if we
Mhm.
spend the last like 3 days of our trip being like, oh man, when I get back, I'm going to have a week or two
Mhm.
weeks worth of stuff, right, to deal with, then we're really not making the most of that time for what our purpose is. So I love that you're saying no, it's not about what we're trying to not have happen. It is about what we're trying to have happen. What is the purpose of this trip? And we use the getting things done model from David Allen, and that's always for any planning. That is the first step, is that intention. What is the purpose of this trip? So
Mhm.
as you're talking, I love this way that you're helping women, because I do think that culturally we do tend to be the trip planners. There's a lot of work that goes
Mhm.
into
Yeah.
those trips as well. And so as you're talking about it, I'm thinking, so on Friday, my daughter and I, who's 8, we are flying to New York. And
Oh.
my husband is not coming with us. And that is very scary. I am very afraid of going to a big city that I don't know. I've been there 3 times maybe in my life. I don't know this city. I don't know how to navigate things. I don't know how to take the train there. And I'm going to have an 8-year-old with me in this city, which I've never experienced that either. And so as you're talking about intention and purpose of this trip,
Mhm.
I'm going, okay, what is my intention and purpose with this trip, right? And so my daughter, ever since she was probably 2, has seen shows or movies that have New York City in them, and she's been like, Mom, I want to go there. I want to go there. And we had to wait until we knew for sure she realized, like, it is not a big apple. It is a city. Like, when
Cold,
you're
yeah.
asking to go to the Big Apple, like, I need to know for sure before I take you or plan that, but like, it's not a Big Apple. She knows. And so as we're been planning this since she was 2, so probably, 6 years in the making, we've been going, at some point, I'm going to take her to New York. And having that be kind of the purpose for me, right? Is that, okay, this is something that my daughter has always wanted to do, right? This is probably one of her only, at this point,
Mhm.
goals in life that has gone on for that much of her life. And so for me, my purpose in wanting to take her there, I'm not really a city person. I like visiting it, right? But it's not like really super exciting to me. But I want her to see that when you have a dream like that, or something like that, yeah, it might take you 6 years to go to New York and do that thing that you've been thinking about since you were 2, but you can do it and it can be done. And all of the steps along the way, like, oh, remember when we had to make sure you knew it wasn't a big apple, right? And like every
Mhm.
time we've seen, Home Alone 2, Lost in New York, or every time we've seen Paw Patrol that's, wherever, we've been like, hey, that's New York City. Like, we're going to take you there someday. That is New York City. And so for me, the purpose really is just that it's not really about the trip as much, right? Like, we have some things planned, we'll have some fun, we'll be together. But really, for me in my day to day life, it's going to impact my day to day life that she have this experience that, okay, if you have a wish, that you can make that a reality, that you can do that thing and be able to think back in your life and go, oh, yeah, I wanted that. And it didn't happen right away. I wasn't going to take her when she was 2, but it did happen because we kept that as a goal. So I just think that's so helpful. And when you talk about the fear of navigating that, I absolutely can relate to that. I've been like downloading, if you download the New York City map on your Google app, right?
Mhm.
So that when you don't have Wi-Fi, you don't have to be afraid. Like, just things like that,
Yeah.
that I think that when you're traveling by yourself, I don't usually really think about, right? Like, okay, we're going to go to a show that starts at 8 p.m. So we're going to get out of that show at about 11, and I'm going to be traveling myself, my college roommate, and my daughter. So we're going to be 3 women out there. And if my husband was there, I'd kind of be like, oh, yeah, we'll just get a cab, And I probably wouldn't have
Mhm.
thought about it as much as I've been thinking about it now with solo travel. So I think it's just such a great point.
Yeah. And in that regard too is, the purpose of your trip is not to challenge yourself navigationally. It's to enjoy time with your daughter and to have these like very pivotal moments in her in her life. So you don't want to add the added stress of getting lost on the train or having to jump into a random cab. Uber is great, Lyft is great. You in some cases you take the expense on because you have the extra comfort of the safety, and that's what I mean with the intentionality. If you're not trying to challenge yourself, if budget isn't as much of an issue, then be kind to yourself and take the Uber and the Lyft and head home at 11.
Absolutely. And it is those kinds of things that, do you recommend planning those kind of ahead of time? Because I think I do
Hmm.
tend to be an over planner with trips, right? So I'm going, all right, I don't want the expense of taking Uber everywhere all the time, because like that will add up real fast. And so like, no, I want to pay $4 on the T, to get where we're going on the train,
Hmm.
or I want to walk if it's, 20 minutes or closer. But knowing that, okay, but that 11 o'clock one, like I'm not taking
Hmm.
the subway with her. Like I'm not walking
Yeah.
that back to the hotel, the three of us, right? So just kind of
Yeah.
planning that out and going like, no, that's the time I'm taking an Uber for sure.
Exactly. Yeah. You balance it out with the other times. You're like, okay, at 12 o'clock after lunch, let's take a long walk. But 11 p.m. after, everything's kind of shutting down, we're going to take the Uber. And I actually have a solo travel confidence workbook, and that asks very specific questions just to pull some of these questions that you might not ask yourself normally of how comfortable am I taking the cab, or how much of a issue is budget or something that I should think about in these scenarios, or what's my comfort level in being in a big city. So I do have that available for your guests as well, for free, and that you can pull so that you can just at least have the questions in mind.
Awesome. And I see that you also have a quiz on your website. What's your play personality? Can you kind of go over what
Yes.
that means and what our play personality is?
Yes. Oh, I'm so excited. So I love the topic of play. So I've been doing a lot of play research. One of the main researchers, Dr. Stuart Brown, he's the writer of the book called Play and the founder of the Institutes of Play, studied thousands of play histories with his clients and boiled it down into 8 play personalities, which I love. I love this book. I love what he's done. And I have taken that principle and applied it to travel, and applied it to connection, and this travel not to escape umbrella. So what they are is, you dive into your childhood, the things that lit you up when you were a child. It sounds like for your daughter, it might be like the play and the shows, and maybe there's that element of her loving the storytelling aspect of that, right? And storyteller is a play personality. If it was more like she loves going outside and playing tag and playing football, or whatever outdoor physical activity, might be a kinesthetic play style. There's creative for the artsy ones. There's the joker. People love the laughter and the comedy. There's director, the people that plan the tea parties and like to plan the things even at an early age. I'm sure there's some children out there.
My daughter.
Collector as well. Yeah, exactly. So there's 8 different play personalities, and we dive in by just understanding. I asked the question on my podcast, like, what was your favorite childhood activity? And you guys can tell me right now, and I'll tell you what your play personality is.
Do you have yours, Chrissa, or you want me to
Yeah,
go?
mine was probably like playing, well, I loved playing Barbies or like playing house, things
Oh,
like that. I don't know.
okay.
Mine was
Yeah, that
like
sounds very storyteller.
mine was like desert island. Like we had to ride these flying unicorns to this island. And then it was like just me and my friend on this island, and we had to like make rafts and stuff.
Oh, I love that. So it sounds like both of you guys have imaginative play as something that you remember first off when you think about childhood. You were doing things with some form of imagination, you're making up stories, so that I can see how that translates into storytelling. So as an adult, it is the ones that love going to shows or understanding the stories or making up things in their mind, hosting a podcast, right? So these are ways that it's not just as a child, but we get so disconnected from what lit us up as we become adults. We start to get shamed for playing, and we're like, oh, you should just be serious. You should just do your work. And then we lose touch of the things that we actually excite us. And it's all about remembering those things and reintroducing that back into your life in ways that you can as an adult. So that's how I start to recommend ways to travel for people. So a lot of people get so overwhelmed, especially as you mentioned in New York. What can you do in New York? Literally everything. So use your play personality as a filter for what's going to light you up on this trip. So lean into that storyteller and find the Broadway shows that excite you, those off Broadway theaters, or just books, readings, all of these things. There's actually in that play personality quiz, I have like a list of what falls under each one. And I start to recommend to people to look into that play personality, or maybe they have a couple play personalities, so that then they can craft a trip that's not just some standard itinerary online. It's actually one that's going to nourish them and reignite that spark in their life. So when they do come back to work or their normal lives, they're that much more lit up because they felt that excitement that they used to feel as a child, and they might not have even realized that there was a correlation. And from the play personality as well, I use that as a form of connection to recommend how people can not just connect with themselves and find their light again, but become so magnetic after they reignite their own light that they start to attract people with that like-minded play personality as well. So if you are traveling and you're in, or even moving to a new city, and are trying to make friends, how do you make friends as an adult? So I encourage people to get back in touch with what feels like play to them and utilize that as the hobby, as a foundation to not just light yourself up, but also meet people that are also interested in the same things.
You had mentioned that sometimes people will have maybe more than one play personality.
Hmm.
And so when you said storyteller, I was thinking about kind of the activities that my roommate from college and my daughter and I have planned for New York. And I think they really do go into the storyteller side of things. So we are going to see Aladdin on Broadway, and then we're going to do like the American Girl doll tea party,
Oh, I love
I
that.
think.
Yeah.
And we're going to do Statue of Liberty, and we're going to do Rockefeller Center, and we're going to do the Central Park carousel. And so the when I think about the things that I've planned, because I'm planning the trip, I think like, yeah, those really do have a lot to do with story, kind of imagination, play, uh,
Hmm.
places, right? And even Statue of Liberty, Central Park, and Rockefeller Center, and the giant McDonald's, which are all on the list. Those places are on there really for us because we see stories or we hear stories. There's so much reference to these
Hmm.
places that for me, when I think, okay, now when I've been to, because I've been to these places before, but now when I've been to them, it's a different experience hearing a story that takes place around there or seeing a movie that takes place there. There's like a frozen
Hmm.
hot chocolate place that we're going to go to because it's in the movie.
Serendipity.
Yes.
Yes, I've been there.
So and my roommate is like a huge movie buff, and so, or my old roommate is a huge movie buff. And so, these are the kinds of things that we kind of plan because I think we have that in common. But then you mentioned the director play style. And I do think that my daughter has, and I probably do also, have some of that. My college roommate does not. So Meredith, if you're listening, you do not have that one.
Mhm.
So how would you say that maybe like we would want to incorporate some of our other people or our own other personality or play types into those kinds of activities?
Yeah, I mean, for your daughter, it would be a great learning opportunity for her to learn how to plan a trip and give her the decision making for maybe a few hours of a day. It doesn't have to be the full day because that could be really taxing for, for an 8-year-old. But giving her the ability to plan one of the restaurants or the places that you're going to go to, that could be something that could light up her director play style if that is something that she has in her as well. So thinking about like fun, creative ways, it doesn't have to be set in stone. I mean, it's play for a reason. So you get to play with it and how it gets delivered to you. And, as adults, we start to take on additional play personality as well, because just because it was something that lit us up as an adult, it's just a starting, or as a child, it's a starting point. Because of course, as we live our lives, we get introduced to things that we might not have been exposed to at a younger age. So you can add on different play personalities, but at least at the core you have your original. You can start from there and then try out a few of the other ones and see which ones light you up, or maybe you don't care for them and you can cross that off the list.
Yeah, I love that. I think that the director part of my daughter and I mean, we enjoy the planning it just as much as we enjoy
Hmm.
going and doing it. And so that really does speak to that director play style that you can play while you're creating the itinerary, while you're looking up the
Hmm.
different potential things that you could do. So
Yeah, turn it into a board game even and or like a spin the wheel of like, okay, give me the recommendations that's on your mind and then
Mhm.
let's leave it up to, what the wheel says.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, because I was like, well, I want to go to a show while we're there. And so there was like Lion King and Aladdin and Harry Potter, I think were like the three that would be appropriate for her. And so then I was like, which one do you want to go to? So we got to watch the trailers of them. We got to watch,
Oh,
look things
nice.
up. And I was like, oh, the actor in the Aladdin one who's doing Jafar, like that's the original voice of Jafar in the movie, which is so cool. So just
Mm.
being able to like do that planning part together really does speak to that director part. And sometimes that can feel so taxing, like the planning it
Mhm.
out and oh my gosh, there's infinite things you could do and that can cause stress. But if we're doing it in a way that does feel like play, that is fun, then it doesn't contribute to that overwhelm that we might already be feeling and that we might be trying to take the vacation to get away from.
Yeah, yeah, you make it part of the process and it becomes a memory in itself.
So you had mentioned that you went to counseling when you were kind of feeling this in your corporate life and in your corporate job.
Hmm.
And you had gone to counseling at that time, and then you had some very different counseling experiences over the years. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so my first counselor was actually at the age of 20. It was a university counselor. So I went to the University of California, San Diego, and so I studied abroad in Rome at the age of 20. And I had studied neuroscience as my major in university, but when I went to Rome, it was art history because I already needed a break at that point. And of course, when you go from like you're studying art history in Rome, that's such a dream. And to go back to neuroscience, which was really tough and really stressful, I not only had reverse culture shock, but then just also really bad depression and just going back into that life. So I went to the free university counselor, and that was probably the worst experience I've ever had in my life with counseling. It actually shied me away from going back into counseling for another 5 some years. I really had to hit a rock bottom to go back into counseling after that experience. And what I didn't love about that experience was that I think a lot of the pressure that I felt at the age of 20 was the pressure of being from an immigrant family and having that path laid out for me when I already knew that that wasn't what I wanted to do with my life, but having to go back into it without any choices and having a counselor that was not of an immigrant background. And so she didn't understand that aspect of what I was feeling. And I felt a lot of judgment and a lot of almost dismissal of, oh, just tell your family no. And it's like, okay, well, can we work through what that is? Or she tried recommending me more to like group therapy. And I was like, no, I really need some one-on-one, especially I had also experienced additional traumas during that trip. So it was I felt unseen, unheard, dismissed. And I went, I believe, for at least a few months, really tried, and it made everything worse to where I just gave up completely on counseling. So that was the worst experience. And then 5 years later, I had gone on my first solo travel trip. So when I studied abroad in Rome, I had made a promise to myself before I came back. And I said, within 5 years, I have to come back to Rome no matter what. It's a promise. I'm going to make my way back. And within 10 years, I have to figure out a way to make my lifestyle align to this right now. Like at this age of 20, I've gotten a taste of the life that I want to live. I need to come back in 10 years. And within 5 years, I got to the point where, okay, I can solo travel because no one else will go with me. Like no one else has the vacation time or the money to go at the age of 25. So I went, but coming back to my life, the reason why I have the company Travel Not to Escape is I lived this. I had solo traveled for a month and came back and realized, oh crap, like I don't love my life so much anymore. Like, and this was 5 years removed, and we're still down the same road, and we're like, okay, no, I still don't like what I'm living. And now I'm in the thick of it, right? I'm now in like I think at that point, a 7 year long-term relationship and like 3 or 4 years into my corporate career. And I have like my apartment and these friends that I didn't really feel close to and the not so great relationship with my family. So I just kept going down the same road. And it started to really manifest in physical symptoms. I was a workaholic. I had no boundaries with work, with any other parts of my life. And I got to the point where I really started asking myself, what's the point? I'm working 16 hours a day. I'm not happy. What's the point? I'm going to the hospital every other month for some unexplained stress rash or nerve pain. Like, I don't know why I'm doing this. And it really started to mess with me. I entered in random terms I was feeling on Google and by the grace of the universe, got a therapist profile from Psychology Today. And it literally was word for word everything that I entered. That SEO worked wonders. So I got every single question that I had in my mind, even down to like the what's the point. And it was a therapist, and she was Filipino. It's Filipino, older lady, and in San Diego where I was living at the time. And within that week, I scheduled my first appointment with her and saw her for the next 2 years every week, and we did an intensive. So she was a lifesaver, to be honest. I didn't even realize how important having someone of the same background was for me, and having someone with a PsyD that had, that professional perspective and the credentials behind what she was saying. That was also very important in helping me trust and in her and have her guide me over the next couple of years to literally change my life in all aspects of it. So those are the from the worst to the best I've had.
Yeah, what do you think? I mean, I know you mentioned like same cultural background, which you didn't know was a thing you needed at the time, but what do you think that she did in session that made such a difference as opposed to the first experience with the university counselor?
Yeah, she listened and she knew exactly the perspective that I was bringing because of, how much she dived in with me. So I felt like it was a partnership and she was really guiding me and I wasn't alone. So really feeling seen, especially having some abandonment wounds already. I think like having a therapist abandon you at the same time, which was the first one, it added to it versus this one really made me feel like you're not alone. We can work through this together. And I think that really helped in that really pivotal time for me. On top of that, she gave me some really direct feedback as well, because there were a lot of things that I just kept hiding in the depths of my core. It's like, okay, it's fine. We just keep stuffing it down. Eventually it'll go away, and it never went away. And she knew not to pry every single thing open. Like my first couple sessions, I told her everything. But as we worked through it, she was so careful to do it in like a domino sequence to where the most impactful thing would open up the next and then open up the next. So at first it came to her because I was a workaholic. I was working 16 hours a day and not feeling like I had control of my life or schedule and really seeing the point in what I was doing. So we worked on that. After that, she said, okay, well, how about your friendships? Now that you have more time because you're not working all the time, let's reintroduce friendships. What does that look like? So we did that. And once I started having more stable emotional support system in terms of friendships, she said, okay, well, let's revisit your healthy eating habits and drinking, and let's manage that. And then after that, she said, okay, we haven't talked about this. You always avoid it, but let's talk about this 10-year long relationship that you've been in that you don't want to talk about. I was like, oh, I didn't know that that was a thing that we were also going to work through. But it was literally domino after domino. But she had the right timing for me to see once I was ready to work on that next thing. And that honestly has been like, I still call her like my best therapist because in no other time, I think, I've had such guidance in that form, or she knew what the path was for me before I even was aware.
Absolutely. I love that you distinguished between direct feedback and advice giving in those between those
Mhm.
two sessions that you described. So in your university experience, you were given advice. Just tell your family, and anytime somebody says just, just do this, just pick up your socks, right? Anytime somebody starts advice with just, there's going to be a challenge there. And so the advice giving can sound or can seem like it's going to be similar to direct feedback. And so sometimes people think, oh, I did not like it when that person gave me advice, right? Like I did not like it when they were like, well, just do this. That's easy. Solve that for you. You're welcome. Right? So that advice giving, I love that you differentiate, because that advice giving is not the role of a counselor at all. And you were able to identify that in how you were feeling after you left or during the session. And when you left the session, you're, oh no, that doesn't feel helpful to me. That doesn't feel useful. And that doesn't feel good to me. I don't feel like this person understands that, no, it's not as simple as just say no to this person, right? By giving advice that makes it seem like it's simple, it's a little bit offensive, to be honest, right? So then when this other counselor that you had a great experience with was giving direct feedback, even though they can sound the same, feedback and advice, they are not the same at all, because that direct feedback you were getting was accurate. You could trust it because you knew that she understood who you were, that she understood the specific things that were going on for you in your life and going on for you internally. And so you could trust that feedback that, yeah, if this person says, you said this to me the other day, right? What's going on with that? That when they give that feedback, right? Or like, well, that didn't seem like it was helpful last year when you did that, right? Is it going to be different this year when you do it? How so? That kind of direct feedback is so helpful because of the trust that you have built there, because you know that that person understands what it is that is happening in your situation. I think that's such an important distinction. So I just love that you brought that up. And then I also love that you were willing to go back 5 years later, right? So many people have this, have a negative experience with counseling, and then they go, well, if that's counseling, I'm done with it. And then they get to that rock bottom point, right? They get to that point of like, I'm having physical manifestations, physical symptoms because I am so stressed out. I have no life because I'm working 16 hours a day. It's something I don't even care about, right? So when we have that, and then we go, oh, but I had that previous counseling experience. That was horrible. Why would I want to go do that again? That bravery and courage and self-knowledge that you gained in that first time to be able to go, okay, no, I'm going back. I'm going to try again, even though I don't think it's going to work because it didn't last time, right? But I'm going to try again. But this time I'm prepared with knowledge about myself. I know that I don't want a counselor that tries to make a soundbite out of my life, right? Like I don't want a counselor who's going to be like, here's a quick fix. That's the end of it. And so knowing that and going into it, it sounds like really allowed you to find that person that you were really needing. I think it's so beautiful and so inspirational.
Yeah, and I was a little worried because she had gotten me to such a great point that I had left a relationship, left the job, left all these things. I like let so many things go that just weren't serving me anymore after all that clarity, and was able to move to Chicago, which I had always wanted to live in a bigger city. And that was one of my saddest moments, was realizing I also had to give up my therapist because she was licensed in California. And so the process of letting go of someone that also just helped so much through a pivotal moment, but also recognizing, she phrased it really well. It's like, you're ready for a new chapter. And I was like, oh, okay. Yes. And so that allowed me to, and then there's also, of course, like a phone call transition period as well. But after that period, it's like, oh, okay, now I have to embrace this new chapter of my life. And she helped me get there. But now it's time for me to find another therapist that will help me with the one moving forward, with what I'm dealing with moving forward. So I think thinking about things in chapters as well also helps with the inevitable transition in therapists that happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm curious kind of like where you are now. So you like got rid of all that stuff in your past, you left your job and your relationship and all that stuff, and then now you're traveling the world living out of a suitcase.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're in Vietnam right now, but kind of like what your steps were after leaving that into getting to this place you are now.
Yeah, yeah. So it's been a wild ride since 2015, and I can't even imagine like all the little micro decisions I've had to make. I sometimes I still have this out of body experience when, for example, I'm on the beach in Vietnam and I think, how did I end up here? Like, what were all those choices again? Because man, if 10 years ago me looked at my life now, like how did you do that? So the first step really was giving up everything in San Diego. To be honest, I was actually a hoarder back then too. Like there was a good year where I couldn't even enter my one bedroom, like my bedroom piece, because I was using shopping as a form of therapy. So, once I finally let go all of that baggage that I'd carried from that life in California, I started fresh, more minimalistic in Chicago, and started to embrace connection, to embrace a little bit more balance in my life, did more travel as well. And that life in Chicago was amazing. It was great. I loved it. And then the pandemic happened, and that again forced me to reevaluate, like, what am I doing? Do I want to be drinking all the time? And also still working a lot and in healthcare consulting. There were a lot of things that I fell into because it was quote unquote like the success track. And by any, gauge, I guess, of what I was looking for at that point, I had accomplished what I was wanting out of my life in terms of salary, in terms of position, etc. And the pandemic made me realize, is that really what you wanted? Is this the life that you want for the next 30 years? And I had gone to a pandemic relationship as well, but that one forced me to realize, like, there's this life that you could have living in the suburbs of Chicago, married, or you embrace the life of travel that's always been like knocking at your door. It's just scratching at it every now and then. And in 2020, I made that decision to follow the travel path. So post heartbreak, I started off traveling around the US temporarily. It was never supposed to be permanent. It was only supposed to be while we were locked down. I was going to go work out of different cities in the US. I had an idea for a book, and then somehow ended up in Mexico. And my Mexico trip was only supposed to be a week and somehow turned into 7 months, and me quitting my 6-year career in healthcare consulting and going into a bit of a spiritual enlightenment period in Mexico. I was just very curious, and I let the universe guide me, because at that point I was like, I'm just a little lost right now, and I need a little bit more purpose. The work that I was doing on a day-to-day just wasn't fulfilling for me. I want to make an impact. What's that impact? And within that 7 months in Mexico, I realized, oh wow, like solo travel has really changed my life. It's really changed my perspective. It's been the one consistent theme that's allowed me to develop personally. And while I was using it as a form of escape, it's like, what can it look like if it is so impactful from a profession or from a personal development standpoint? So I started to, think about making content in this area. And then after I was in Mexico for a bit, I transitioned to working in tech. So I worked in software for a couple of years while still working remotely. So I kept traveling further south, down to Argentina, all over South America. Amazing time. And then all of the corporate tech companies, of course, started calling everyone back into the office. And I had to make that decision at the end of 2022 to say, I am going to say bye to this cushy tech job and figure out how to make that promise to my 20-year-old self come true, of really fulfilling that lifestyle as a permanent lifestyle for me, like actually traveling full time. So since end of 2022, in the last year and a half now, it's wild how fast that goes. I've been doing a lot of different things, all under the Travel Not to Escape umbrella, creating content, partnering with brands, starting my podcast, doing freelance positions, helping other entrepreneurs, hosting events, hosting workshops, really trying to share all of the lessons that I've learned through this process and help other women that may have been the 20-year-old version of me, or the 25-year-old version of me, or even the 30-year-old version of me that gave everything up, right? So there's like very different moments in time that I want to help guide them, because a lot of women have these you see the before, you see the after, and you don't know how to get there. And so I really want to clarify exactly what we just talked about of like, what does the messy middle look like? And be very transparent in the fact that I had therapists, I had coaches, I had a lot of mentors and friends that I leaned on, and other spiritual modalities I was open to, and really exploring all of those in detail so that people know what they can use for their own toolkit.
Absolutely. I love that. The messy middle. It is,
Hmm.
it's such a challenge, especially when we are removing things from our lives. I feel like we are it feels easier to add things to our
Hmm.
lives a lot of times than it does to remove things. So, shopping is a great example, or compulsive overeating is a great example. It feels easier
Hmm.
to add things, to do more than it does to remove things. And I think that is really what you identified here, is that you were in a situation, I think a lot of people can relate, where there were external expectations on your life, who you would be, what you would do, right? And how your life would look. And so, I mean, I can relate to it when you said, somebody in the family's got to be a doctor. I was like, hello. That's literally the only reason that those letters are in front of my name, right? Is so that I could not have to ever do it again, right? Like I could do it and
Hmm.
done, and I never have to ever do that again. And so when we let go of things, though, in our lives, decluttering or items, you talked about having those hoarding tendencies, right? Which we know is an anxiety disorder when it's a clinical disorder. And so be, because when we let go of our things or our titles or our
Hmm.
relationships or our location, then we go, oh no, like what's left under there, right? Like what
Yeah.
actually is,
Who are you?
like
Yeah.
who am I if, like, this isn't my water glass and I am drinking out of some stranger's water glass because I'm staying at their short-term rental, right? So then
Yeah.
who am I'm still a person who's got to have water next to me all the time, right? And so being able to kind of identify, no, there are things about me that I'm taking with me no matter where I am. So travel is such a great way to uncover those things if we are, like you said, being intentional about that. Because, okay, I'm going on this trip to New York. Who am I when I'm not in a couple with my husband, right? Who am I?
Hmm.
I have a mechanical or travel or navigation issue, and I don't have that part of what I consider like part of me, because I don't worry about that stuff if my husband is there, because he has that complementary skill. And so who am I in New York with my daughter, right? As a mom, as a woman, and as a professional, right? Our work life comes into that kind of travel as well. So I just really, really love your example of letting things go and allowing that to build who we actually are. Like as soon as we take off the title of what we do, then
Hmm.
we can start looking at, oh, okay, who actually am I? And that's a scary process, especially when we've got these ways of coping with that anxiety that is already there, right? So where you had said, yeah, I didn't have a support system around me. Well, anxiety will do that a lot of the time, right?
Hmm.
And social anxiety will certainly do that. And so being able to say, like, okay, so I'm going to remove some of these maybe more codependent relationships, right? I'm going to remove that
Hmm.
because that's what's going to allow me then to say, okay, who am I without these supports? Who am I not in a relationship as a single person? Okay, now that I know that, and now that I'm comfortable in that, now I can go and create friendships as this person, right? So I just think
Hmm.
that's so such beautiful inspiration of letting things go, and not just our physical things, but our location and our therapist. And our
Yeah.
families and our, relationships that are not helpful to us or serving us well or supporting us. So, yeah, I think it's great, and what you're doing is beautiful because it is going past the typical, travel agents are not really very popular anymore. But the
Mhm.
thing that they used to do that even I think is helpful now, even though, yeah, I can book flights on Expedia pretty easily. I don't need to call into a travel agent to do that. But what a travel agent used to do for my parents when we were traveling when I was a kid is they would look to purpose. They would help identify what activities or what methods or what budget is important to you guys as a family taking this trip. And that is a piece that definitely gets lost now that we don't have necessarily travel agents doing that. And we're kind of
Mhm.
planning these things ourselves. And so you're really digging in there. And I think it's just a beautiful, beautiful service that you're doing.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's all about empowering people to make those decisions on their own. So you
Yeah.
don't necessarily need a travel agent. Like I want to give you all this information so that you don't have to go through all the 10 years I went through. So it's a lot easier for you.
That is awesome. So if you could give some suggestion to somebody who might be on the fence about starting counseling, what suggestion might you give that person?
I say just start now. Whenever a friend always, they have some type of issue, I know that they need therapy. I tell them you have to do it this week because you can talk yourself out of it so quickly. And so many of my friends talk themselves out of it. And I know that if they just sat for 1 hour and did it now and scheduled 3 people that aligned with what they were looking for, they will find that person. But all of them procrastinate. And for reasons of their own, right? They're scared. They're scared of the unknown, scared to uncover what it is that they've been, hiding from themselves. But if you can get the courage for an hour today, tomorrow, this week, whatever is going to light a fire in you, just do it. There's so many resources out there. I'm sure you all have a list of resources for people to look into. That's my biggest thing is like give yourself a really quick deadline and just do it. Like I've found all of my therapists within an hour and I've stuck with them for years, and it's all about the alignment and the fit, but you're not going to find that unless you actually purposely make the decision to go. So I think that's like my biggest tip. Just do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. It was so great to meet you and hear all about your travels. If you are interested in learning more about Geleen's podcast or the quiz or all the other resources she offers, her website is travelnottoescape.com. And there you can find links to the podcast, to the play quiz, to her Meaningful Friendships Around the World That Passport to Connection, Facebook group, website, all of that stuff.
I'm Geleen Antonio and I need a counselor.
Awesome. And I'm Chrissa Hunt.
And I'm Julie Johnson, and we need a counselor.
And so do you.
Thank you for listening to the You Need a Counselor podcast. We are so grateful that you're here. Now, we want to hear from you. Text us or give us a call at 515-650-3231. You can also find and connect with You Need a Counselor on Facebook and Instagram. If you've enjoyed today's show, please take a moment to like, review, or leave a comment, as all of these things help others to find and benefit from the podcast as well. If you're in the state of Iowa and interested in mental health counseling or behavioral health intervention services, give us a call at 800-531-4236.